Hey everybody, so I'm back recording on my phone here, still don't have a working webcam. But today was NHL trade deadline day. The deadline was at 3 p.m. this afternoon, I believe. I worked all day, so that's why you guys have not heard from me until now. I have been at work. I missed pretty much everything. I missed everything that happened today. I left for work at like 7 this morning and didn't get home until almost 5:30. So I missed pretty much everything that's happened today. That might be a good thing, because rather than going through and doing like 30 individual separate videos on each individual trade, I'm just going to recap it. It's at the end. It's over. No more moves will be made. So I'm just gonna recap it and talk about everything in this one video. This video will probably be pretty long, as I have a lot of trades to go through, and just I'm gonna go through and give my opinion on each one and what I think, about the deal. So let's just get this thing started. This is definitely probably going to be better than having a bunch of small individual videos. I'm just going to go through everything in this one. So this is my 2019 NHL trade deadline recap. Before we get to today's trade, there's one trade from yesterday that I did not talk about that I think deserves a mention, and that is Brandon Montour going to the Buffalo Sabres. Brendan Gooley and a conditional first-round draft pick go back to Anaheim. I don't know what the condition on that first-round pick is, but that's certainly an upgrade for the Buffalo Sabres. I don't think this is a move that just makes. It's not going to make Buffalo a playoff team. I don't think Buffalo gets in. But Brandon Montour I believe he has term on his contract, so this isn't a 2-month rental. This is, he's signed. Brandon Montour is a Buffalo Sabre and going to be now. That's a really good move for Buffalo's defense. I like Montour a lot. Good young offensive defenseman. I think he has a lot of upside in the NHL and will really help out Buffalo's defense. And then they give up Brendan Gooley, who has been in the AHL for basically his entire career. That's not a huge loss, and a conditional first-round pick. This trade absolutely makes Buffalo better, especially right now. Montour is a huge upgrade over an AHL defenseman. So now we get to actually today, Monday the 25th. I'm just going through on TSN Trade Tracker, and I'm just going to talk about each trade as I scroll through here. So this one I did hear about early this morning. Gus Nyquist goes to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for a second-round draft pick and a conditional third-round draft pick. So San Jose, not a huge move, not a game-changing move, but someone who can come in and play in the middle of your lineup on your second or third line, provide some depth scoring, some secondary scoring, really good shot. And they don't lose anything off their current roster. Their second-round pick and a conditional third, that's not a big deal. I think that's a good move for the San Jose Sharks, and will certainly... They didn't give up too much, and it gives them somebody who can score 20 goals in the middle of their lineup and help them offensively going into the playoffs. Patrick Siloff for Brian Gibbons. Siloff's an AHL defenseman. Gibbons is a borderline NHLer. He shouldn't even really be in the NHL at this point. That's not a huge deal. Two lousy teams making that deal, Anaheim and Ottawa. Not even going to talk more about that. That's a waste of time. Goaltender Keith Kincaid to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for a 5th-round pick. That is interesting. So Kincaid... he's not having a great year this year. Nobody in New Jersey really is. But Buffalo, I don't know why I just said Buffalo. Columbus, he's I guess a third goaltender now. They have Bobrovsky. They have Korpisalo. So now I guess they have Kincaid as a third goaltender. I guess that move is basically just depth in case one of those two get hurt. They'll have someone that they can feel comfortable putting into a backup role if one of those two were to get hurt, Korpisalo or Bobrovsky. Unless Bobrovsky got moved, but I don't think so. I definitely would have heard about that. So Kincaid, I guess, is being brought to Columbus to be a depth goaltender, a third goalie, in case something happens and they need him. All right, now first pretty big deal here. Kevin Haze to the Winnipeg Jets in exchange for Brendan Lemieux, a first-round pick, and a 2022 conditional fourth-round pick. All right, so Kevin Haze, one of the bigger names on the market, he goes to Winnipeg. He is going to be their second-line center. So if you remember, I don't know if I ever said this on a video or if I just said this talking to people, but I thought that Matt Duchene would have been a really good ad for the Winnipeg Jets, because I think the biggest hole in Winnipeg's lineup is their second-line center. That was an area that they needed to improve. Brian Little, to me, is a number 3. Roslovic has not developed as quickly, I think, as Jets fans had hoped. He's not a second-line center at this point. He's still a bottom 6 forward. So they needed a second-line center. Last year they got Paul Stastny, but then lost him in free agency. So now they go and get another deadline deal for a second-line center, and it's Kevin Haze from the New York Rangers. Duchene, obviously, I thought that Winnipeg would go hard after him. He goes to Columbus, so they get probably the next guy down as far as centers on the market go, and that's Kevin Haze. So this is a great move for Winnipeg because it really fills a slot that they desperately needed to fix going into the playoffs. And they give up Brendan Lemieux, who I like Brendan Lemieux. He is a fourth line, tough, willing to fight player, my kind of hockey for sure. But he's a fourth liner, and that's what he is, and that's probably all he'll ever be. I don't think he has the offense to really lift himself into that Tom Wilson, Wayne Simmons type of power forward where they hit and fight, but also can score a good number of goals and points. I don't see the offense there with Brendan Lemieux, at least not yet. I think he's more, he's a fourth liner and going to be a fourth liner, so that's not a huge loss for Winnipeg. And then the first-round pick, but, you lose a first-round pick, which isn't great, but you need players like Kevin Haze to go deep into the playoffs. You need to have a second-line center to go deep into the playoffs. And Winnipeg is a team that should be all in on winning the Stanley Cup this year because they are more than capable. So, draft picks don't really mean much to the Winnipeg Jets right now. They need players that are going to win them a Stanley Cup this year. So, good on the Rangers for picking up a first-round pick, a conditional fourth, and getting a good, young, tough guy in Brendan Lemieux. But Winnipeg, they filled what they needed, which is a second-line center in Kevin Haze. So that's a deal that works for both teams, but obviously Winnipeg being the playoff team here is the one it really, really helps. Jordan Wheel to Montreal for Michael Chaput. Again, those are borderline NHL players. I'm not going to talk more about that. Cliff Poo and Tomas Jurko, the AHL deal. That means nothing. Okay, Derick Brassard to the Colorado Avalanche along with a conditional 6th-round pick. Going back to Florida is a 3rd-round pick. Okay. So obviously we all know that Derick Brassard has really fallen off over the last few years. He is not the player that he was 3 or 4 years ago. And you can see that his value has really fallen off because he only fetched a 3rd-round pick in return. Brassard was a disaster in Pittsburgh. Now for Colorado, this is not a bad deal for Colorado. Now they're a borderline playoff team. They're in a dogfight right now with Chicago and Minnesota to get into the playoffs in that second wild card spot. They needed help up front. They needed some more offense. Colorado has been a one-line team all season long. It's their first line, and that's it. So they needed some good depth and some added secondary scoring up front. Brassard, if he can play well, can give you that. If he plays like he did in Pittsburgh, where he's a 3rd liner, then that's going to be an issue. But, Colorado doesn't have much to lose here. All they gave up was a 3rd-round pick, and they're in a position where they had to add somebody, or they're not going to make the playoffs if they didn't. So they go in, they get Brassard, they don't give up a lot for him, and if it works out, then that could really boost Colorado heading into the postseason and get them into the postseason. And if it doesn't work out, they really didn't give up that much. It's certainly worth a shot if you're the Colorado Avalanche. Okay, Columbus Blue Jackets get Adam Mcquaid, from the New York Rangers in exchange for Julius Bergman. I assume that's a prospect. I've never heard of him. A 4th-round pick and a 7th-round pick. So the Rangers continue to load up on picks. Julius Bergman, I've never heard of him. I don't know anything about him. So, I don't know if he's a good prospect or if he's just, a middle-of-the-road prospect or somebody who's never going to make the NHL. But Columbus obviously looking to add to their defensive depth. They add Adam Mcquaid. McQuaid's as tough as they come in the NHL. You're going to need guys like that in the postseason, especially if you get into a playoff series, against Tom Wilson in Washington. Mcquaid would be a guy that would really... I don't know exactly the word I was looking for, but McQuaid would tone Wilson down a little bit, because Tom Wilson does not want to have to deal with Adam McQuaid throughout a series with the Columbus Blue Jackets. If Wilson starts running around and going after guys, then McQuaid is going to beat the living crap out of him, and he knows that. So that I think is a really good addition for Columbus. Depth defenseman, he can be your number 6, he can be your number 7. He doesn't have to play every night, but he gives you some firepower heading into the postseason, which is always helpful, and another good depth defenseman and somebody who can play very well. People think of Adam McQuaid and they think fighter. They don't realize that he actually is a pretty good defensive defenseman, and there's a reason he played on so many really good Boston Bruins teams. He's not a liability. So McQuaid is a good depth guy to have, and I think he'll help Columbus a lot, especially in the playoffs if they play Washington. Even if they play the New York Islanders or someone like that, they have Matt Martin. McQuaid is just a good guy to have around. The Calgary Flames add Oscar Fantenberg from the LA Kings in exchange for a 4th-round pick, a conditional 4th-round pick. I don't know what that condition is. Maybe it gets higher if Fantenberg signs or something like that. But again, depth defenseman. This is similar to what the Blue Jackets did with McQuaid. The Flames are adding a depth defenseman, somebody who can come in. They can be your number 6. They can be your number 7 if you need them to be. And they give you more depth heading into the playoffs. You have to have depth at every single position in the playoffs. We all know that. Defense especially. So good move by the Flames there. And again, they really don't give anything up. This is interesting. The Nashville Predators gave up Kevin Fiala. I didn't think they would, because Fiala is a pretty good young offensive player. I didn't think they'd give him up. They did. They sent him to Minnesota, who's also trying to make the playoffs. So, these types of deals are interesting, because a lot of times at the deadline you have, the sellers, the teams that are way out of playoff contention, no chance of the postseason, giving their assets, valuable players, to playoff teams who are looking to make a run. But in this case, you have 2 potential playoff teams making a deal. Usually, teams in the playoff hunt don't want to subtract from their current roster. They're just looking to give up draft picks and prospects and add a roster player. But this is interesting. So Mikael Granlund goes to the Nashville, and Kevin Fiala goes to Minnesota. So that's interesting. Fiala's a little bit younger, not as polished, I'd say, at the NHL level as Granlund is. Granlund's a pretty good player. It's kind of a swap. I don't see where either team gets noticeably better out of this. I just think maybe a change of scenery would help both of these players. I don't see where one is that much better than the other. Granlund's a little more experienced. Fiala, he's got some pretty good talent. So maybe Minnesota was just going to looking to go in a younger, more maybe higher potential upside direction, whereas Nashville's looking for the proven players who they know what they're going to get out of them and gear up on, load up on those types of guys. Now, this is a huge deal, and I have heard about this. Mark Stone goes to the Vegas Golden Knights. He has also signed a massive 8-year extension with Vegas as well. So this is not a rental. This is Mark Stone is going to be a Vegas Golden Knight for years to come. And heading into the playoffs where Vegas is noticeably behind San Jose and Calgary in the Pacific, this is a huge addition for the Vegas Golden Knights. To get a high-end goal scorer like Mark Stone at the deadline, drastically changes that team. They lost David Perron and James Neal after last season in the offseason, and I don't think they really made up for that offensively until now. Now they bring in Mark Stone, who is certainly a better offensive player than either of those guys, Neal or Perron. Mark Stone is a level above that. So you are bringing a legitimate 30-goal NHL guy into your lineup here in Vegas, and that is absolutely massive for this team. Now they have Pacioretty. They obviously still have William Karlsson, Jonathan Marchessault, Riley Smith. This team has this. Just adding one player like this just ignites the offense so much in Vegas. And Vegas is not a bad offensive team wasn't a bad offensive team before him, but now that they have him, they are loaded up front. So that's a huge move. And they give up Derick Brassard. Must be a prospect. I don't know him. Oscar Lindberg and a second-round pick. So once again, it seems like Ottawa does not get a lot in return for a big player. I said this at the Duchesne deal, and it seems to keep on happening. Oscar Lindberg is a borderline NHL player, second round pick, not a first. So that's a huge, way less in value. Unless Derick Brassard is like a high-end prospect, like somebody who's going to become a very good NHL defenseman, I think Ottawa got absolutely fleeced again in a trade for a high-profile player. This is unbelievable that Pierre Dorion cannot get value in return for any of these trades. It's unbelievable. So again, I don't know about Brandstrom. Maybe he's really, really good and a high-end prospect. And if that's the case, this is a little bit better for Ottawa. But if Derick Brassard is just, a regular run-of-the-mill prospect and somebody who maybe will be an NHL player, maybe not, then this is an absolute joke of a trade for Ottawa. And Vegas absolutely stole Mark Stone. Lindberg doesn't hold much value. That second-round pick should have been a first, in my opinion. If you're trading Mark Stone, who can score 30 goals every year in the NHL, you want a first-round pick in return, and how they didn't get that, I don't know. So that looks like a tremendous deal for the Vegas Golden Knights. Another very high-profile deal here. We have Wayne Simmons going to the Nashville Predators. That's a big add for Nashville. Again, they add Granlund for Fiala. Now they add Wayne Simmons. They give up Ryan Hartman, who is a fourth-line grinder type young kid, and a fourth-round pick, a conditional fourth-round pick to Philly. So, this is a huge deal for the Nashville Predators. They add, adding Granlund was one thing, but now they add Wayne Simmons as well. And listen, I like Ryan Hartman, and again, he plays the style of hockey that I really enjoy. He's a physical young player. He's willing to fight from time to time, can throw hits, will get under opponent's skin, but he doesn't, really, the offense isn't fully there yet. The offense is there with Wayne Simmons, although I do think it's starting to decline. Wayne Simmons is certainly past his peak. Wayne Simmons can still score goals in the NHL and can score 25 goals in a season and be a useful player on the power play, which Ryan Hartman is not. Also, Wayne Simmons is an upgrade not only in offense, but an upgrade in the toughness department as well. Because yes, Ryan Hartman is a physical kid and willing to fight. Wayne Simmons is one of the tougher players in the NHL. So Nashville not only upgrades their offense, they upgrade their toughness as well. That is a double win for the Nashville Predators. Actually, I can't believe that that's all Philly got for Wayne Simmons, given what I had been hearing about how big his asking price was going to be. A conditional 4th-round pick and Ryan Hartman. I mean, that 4th-round pick must become a higher pick if Simmons signs with Nashville, or if Nashville, maybe it's based on how deep Nashville goes into the playoffs potentially. But that's gotta become something more than a 4th-round pick. And Hartman for Simmons, I would think Simmons would have fetched a lot more than that. But that for Nashville, that is an absolutely huge addition and a huge trade. And I mean, Nashville and Winnipeg, that is going to be a dogfight in the Central Division. I don't think any other teams in that division can touch them. Not even St. Louis, not now. I think that it's going to be Nashville and Winnipeg, and then whichever team comes out of that will probably go to the Stanley Cup final, in my opinion. I mean, Nashville hasn't had the best year this year, but with these additions, this should put them over the top and put them right back into, full-on Stanley Cup contention. The St. Louis Blues add Michael Del Zotto from the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a 6th-round draft pick. Depth defense move, not a big deal there. Del Zotto probably won't. He won't play in the Blues' regular top 6. If everyone there is healthy, he won't. Vince Dunn, I think, has earned himself a roster spot and a spot in the lineup. I think Del Zotto's going there as a 7, maybe even an 8, probably as a number 7, and he'll just fill in, if somebody gets injured, and maybe play a game or two here or there. But come playoff time, when St. Louis puts their best roster out, Del Zotto, I don't think will be in the top 6. That's just a depth move. My Boston Bruins, they made another move. Marcus Johansson from the New Jersey Devils in exchange for a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick. So this is actually really interesting, and I think a really good move for Boston given where they were at. So, I mean, Boston's a good team. There's no denying that. They're a very good hockey team. They had Charlie Coyle in the earlier trade that I've already talked about, which is a move that I liked a lot. Coyle is now their 3rd-line center. Boston's 2 issues going into the deadline was 3rd-line center and 2nd-line winger to play with David Krejci. They have not been able to find anyone suitable for those positions from within at all this season. So they had Coyle to play 3rd-line center, and they had Marcus Johansson to play wing. I think this is a tremendous move, and Boston has filled both of their 2 weak areas. Boston's defense is fine. They have a great 1-2 punching goal. Their 4th line is fantastic. Their 1st line is fantastic. Their issues were in the middle of their forward group, getting guys playing at a high enough level. Now they have an issue at center. They fixed that with Charlie Coyle. They have an issue at wing, scoring. They fixed that with Marcus Johansson. Boston now is a team to be reckoned with in the Eastern Conference. Again, I don't think they get past Tampa Bay. I don't think anyone gets past Tampa Bay, but they're giving it their best shot. And they only give up a 2nd-round pick and a 4th-round pick. I mean, Boston's already shown that they're going in on trying to win a Stanley Cup within, they went all in last year getting Rick Nash. They're going all in again this year with these 2 additions. Boston's trying to win a Stanley Cup, so I don't care about the draft picks. They're in win now mode. So again, I think that's not a huge Wayne Simmons type addition for Boston, but it's a good fit for them and somebody who can help them with a specific need that they have. And again, Boston, they're ready for a playoff run, and I would not be surprised to see them. Again, I don't have high hopes for them against Tampa Bay, but we'll see. But they're certainly going for it, and you got to give them credit for that. They're going for it. Matt Hendricks from the Minnesota Wild back to the Winnipeg Jets. in exchange for a 7th-round draft pick. If you remember what I was talking about, one of the earlier trades I talked about in this video, Brendan Lemieux gets traded to the in the Kevin Haze deal. So Winnipeg all of a sudden has a hole toughness-wise. Now, Winnipeg overall is a tough team, so even without Brendan Lemieux and not replacing that, they're still a tough team, and they're not a team that has to worry about getting pushed around in the playoffs. However, Lemieux is their top fighter and probably their toughest guy in the lineup as far as fighting goes, and is just, pure physicality. So they obviously wanted to replace that. They bring in a savvy veteran guy who's been around the league for a long time now in Matt Hendricks. They only give up a 7th-round pick. That means virtually nothing. So they add Hendricks. I really like that move. Great guy in the locker room, longtime NHL veteran, and a tough customer who can drop the gloves, play physically, can kill penalties. I'm a big fan of that move for Winnipeg. And again, he doesn't have to play every night. He's just a guy to have in your arsenal in case you get... if you're Winnipeg, you're going to get into nasty playoff series with teams like Minnesota, with teams like St. Louis or Nashville. Whoever you end up playing, it's going to be a nasty series in the Central Division. You got to have guys like that. So that's a really good addition for Winnipeg, in my opinion. This is interesting. Tanner Pearson to the Vancouver Canucks for Erik Goodbranson. So Pittsburgh, you finally want to add some toughness now with Goodbranson. You gave up Jamie Oleksiak earlier in the year. I was not happy about that for Pittsburgh. Now they go and get another big defensive defenseman who's willing to fight. I guess somewhere along the way figured out that they might want to have a little bit of toughness in that lineup. Now, I will say Erik Goodbranson is certainly a much better overall hockey player than Jamie Oleksiak. Goodbranson's a pretty good defenseman. Very defensive defenseman. Not going to give you a lot points-wise, but he's a good defensive defenseman. Good, really, solid bottom pair guy. So I do like this move for Pittsburgh because I think it addresses a need that they certainly have. Defense and toughness, he certainly helps out in both of those cases. And they give up Tanner Pearson. Tanner Pearson hasn't done shit, quite frankly. He hasn't done much of anything at all this year. Where are those Penguins fans back when Tanner Pearson was traded to Pittsburgh from LA? Where are those Penguins fans that were in the comments? Well, I didn't like that trade from the get-go. I thought Tanner Pearson wasn't going to do anything. I don't think he was a high-quality player, and I said that. And then there were all these Penguins fans in the comment section just ripping me and complaining about it and acting like Tanner Pearson is somehow this great NHL player. And guess what what he did for Pittsburgh? Jack shit. And you know what? He was so bad that Pittsburgh, they added him to try and help them with their secondary scoring, and they shipped him out at the deadline. A team that is buying at the deadline, trying to get into a playoff spot, ships him out because he's been so bad. So yeah, where are those guys? Because that Tanner Pearson trade was garbage, and Tanner Pearson is garbage. So Vancouver, they're not making the playoffs. Erik Goodbranson, I think that's a good move for Pittsburgh. They need that kind of player in their lineup, especially come playoff times. If Pittsburgh even makes the playoffs, there's definitely some doubt there at this point, given Carolina's resurgence and climb in the standings, and Columbus certainly isn't going away. So, as much as I think a lot of Penguins fans on this channel, I think, have been a little too high on their team this year and a little too optimistic about their team. This year's Penguins team is not that great. They're really not. And now there's a chance they could miss the playoffs. Again, I don't think they miss. I think they do get in, but it will probably be a first-round exit for Pittsburgh this year. Nathan Bellew from Buffalo to Winnipeg. Now, he had asked for a trade because he wasn't getting playing time in Buffalo. Now, he sure as hell ain't going to get much playing time in Winnipeg. Again, this is a depth move for the Jets. Bellew on the Winnipeg team is probably, he might get waived to the minors. He might get sent to the minors. If not, he'll probably be kept as an 8th defenseman. But he ain't cracking their top 6 when they're healthy, that's for sure. He couldn't even crack the top 6 in Buffalo, let alone Winnipeg. So that is a strictly depth move for the Winnipeg Jets in case they run into injury trouble on the back end. And all they give up is a 6th-round pick. That's meaningless. Winnipeg also adds Bogdan Kiselevic. I've never heard of him. It was for a 7th-round pick. That's a minor league move, in my opinion. That doesn't mean anything. Vancouver and San Jose. This looks like an AHL deal because neither of these guys are NHL players. Linus Karlsson for Jonathan Dahlen. I don't know either of them. Minor deal. Toronto. Wow, this is the first Toronto's come up on here. Did they do nothing today? Hello, first-round exit. Toronto adds Nick Paton for Par Lindholm from the Winnipeg to Winnipeg. That is an extra forward type deal. Both of those guys are borderline NHL players. That's not a big deal at all. They probably won't even crack the regular lineup. Chris Weidman to the Pittsburgh Penguins for Jean-Sebastien Day. So, you know, again, those are 2 borderline NHL players. Jean-Sebastien D or Day, however you say that, has been in the minors for most of this year. Chris Weidman, I haven't really seen him play, so I don't know if he's been playing at all or if he's just been scratched or what the deal is with him. That's a very, very depth move for Pittsburgh. You know, if you're the Penguins, you're trying to tell me that you need Chris Weidman, but you didn't need Jamie Oleksiak. That's just stupid. Yeah, Weidman's going to be a very far down the depth chart type guy for Pittsburgh. And Alex Broadhurst for future considerations between Winnipeg and Columbus. Again, that's got AHL written all over it because I don't know who Alex Broadhurst is, and that's it. At least that's it. That's on TSN. If I missed anything, I'm sorry. It's because it's not showing up here. I just refreshed the page and no new trades have come up. So I guess that's it for deadline day. So yeah, interesting. Winnipeg made a lot of moves, some very minor moves, depth moves, even minor league moves, some very decent moves. Obviously the Kevin Haze deal really stood out. Nashville made big time moves. So Winnipeg and Nashville, 2 of the best teams in the Western Conference, both got better. San Jose, they didn't make a huge splash, but I think they did improve their team a little bit. Pittsburgh with some moves, although those might be too little too late for the Penguins.